and I could sense somebody beside me. I didn't look over and see him because I was looking up my life raft, and I guess he was, assigned to that same life raft. And I could sense incoming. I just could feel it almost. And all of a sudden, I got splattered like crazy, and I thought, oh, my God. I didn't know if I was hit again because I was in such pain that I didn't know if I could take any more pain, that it might not even show up if I was hit. Well, I sort of got off balance, and I hopped, with my foot. And when I come down, I look down, and I'm standing on the fleshy calf of the guy that was standing next to me and his foot. And that's all that was left of him. He just completely exploded. He was gone. One minute he's standing beside me, the next minute all that's there is the calf and ankle and foot. And then I heard some yelling from a gear locker, yelling Weaver, real loud and everything. Well, I couldn't go backwards or anything, so one guy, I still don't know to this day, because my God, I'd love to give him a hug. He got a hold of me and got me under the armpits and pulled me in the gear locker. He ripped off his shirt and stuffed it in that big hole in my stomach. And then they got me on a stretcher and put me in the companionway with other wounded, because that was the center of the ship, even though it was on deck, with more protection there. And we're all praying in there. And no, just give me a second here.
Yeah, take your time, Richard. It's okay.
To me, it almost sounded like some kind of maybe Oriental or some kind of a foreign chant, because it was like, and I'm probably not going to do it justice, but it was like, over and over. But we were all praying in English, There wasn't any kind of a chant. It's just that our different voices resonated that sound in that companionway, and I will never, ever forget that sound. And anyway, then the way you understand, the SOS got it out, and then they come over, they stopped firing, but first they went back and they went and got boarding parties on these torpedo gunboats, and they were going to board us and kill everybody aboard. But in the meantime, one of my shipmates risked his life, and one of the antennas that wasn't hot, that they were having trouble with, he jerry-rigged it and got the SOS out, and then once that happened, well, that foiled it, sort of. They went to apologize, and the captain just told them to go to hell. And what is amazing, and I got to share this with you because this is the way it is, the planes were unmarked. There was no markings at all on the planes. They were camouflaged, and Johnson called back planes from the USS Saratoga. The captain of Saratoga came to one of our reunions, and he knew I was one of the worst ones wounded that lived. And he was sobbing at the table, just him and I talking, and apologizing so much that he had all this firepower. And he said, I couldn't do anything for you. And
Johnson.
I told him it's okay. I said, Johnson gave his direct order to McNamara to call the planes back and let us sit there 2 hours under attack. That's as long as the Pearl Harbor attack, if anybody wants to think about it. It's a long time when you don't have a gun. And anyway, they called the jets back, and what had happened is they had French-built torpedoes, and they weren't very accurate. They came very close to hitting us, but they weren't very accurate. And this is something I said earlier, but my shipmates don't know, because I hired a special investigator because my DD-214 never said I was on the USS Liberty. My duty stations that they list by date, where I was, boot camp of Chickamauga, my first ship, Well, from April to June the 9th, that that time didn't exist in my life, because they just put USS America. They never put Liberty. They did everything they could possibly do to disprove that I was aboard that ship. And where was I at?
Well, that's
they
part
ran
of it.
out. They ran out of torpedoes. I got to get this out while it just come to me.
Yeah, go ahead. Get it out, Richard.
They ran out of torpedoes, and the USS Amberjack, a submarine, was 1 mile off of our starboard bow the whole time. And this is hearsay, because I couldn't, there's no really legitimate proof, but I was told that they were filming the whole attack through the periscope. And I hired this investigator to get my record straightened out, because I want to be buried in Arlington near my captain. And they told my wife, because she was handling that paperwork, that well, don't matter how many pictures you got of you on the ship, on a stretcher or anything, that means nothing. You got to have it in print. Well, I hired him, and he started, there's a left and a right side of your records, and the right side they'll share with you, but the left they won't. Well, he had a good way with people, and they helped him out, and here, he got information, and I got the transfer papers from Larry Soper at a reunion, so that was proof that I was on the Liberty. And so anyway, they were parked there, and this investigator somehow got a hold of somebody that knew somebody, that there was 2 guys that were crewmen on the USS Amberjack, and one guy was in charge of arming the torpedoes, and the other guy was in charge of firing the torpedoes from the bridge on the captain's command. And he tried to talk them into getting on tape, and then he said, "Oh no." Well, about a year and a half later, I got a call from this investigator, and what did I just say?
You were talking about.
I got a call from the investigator, and these 2 guys, I guess, got a bad case of PTSD, because they wanted to put it on tape, because they said that you can't deal with it anymore. It's a truth that needs told, and we just can't keep it to ourselves anymore. And this is what they told the investigator on tape. The one guy said, "Well, I'm in charge of arming them, and I got an order to arm, and I'll just say number 3 or torpedo, because I don't know what number they used." So he armed the torpedo, and he's looking around at the other guys, going, "My God, what are we arming a torpedo for?" And anyhow, the other guy at the bridge, the captain gives a direct order, and there's no way he could give that order without the president's authorization through McNamara, and it might have been directly from him. I don't know. But that is the torpedo that hit the Liberty. The United States submarine torpedo hit the Liberty, and we lucked out so much, because it hit the superstructure of the skeleton of the ship exactly in the middle of an I-beam, right at the strongest point.
So when the Israelis, Richard, wait, this is actually like mind-blowing news, because this is part of the Liberty story that not many people even have ever heard before.
Even my shipmates don't know.
This is incredible. So what you're saying is the Amberjack is actually the one that fired the torpedo that hit the Liberty.
Yeah, they were out. They fired all their French torpedoes, and they missed. Well, Johnson wanted, he told
yeah, he wanted the ship. What is he quoted as saying? "I want the ship to go to the bottom of the sea," or whatever.
Yeah, he said that in your Oval Office to one of the admirals, the Joint Chief of Staff, and I forget his name because my mind is sort of racing right now, a little emotional.
Don't worry, no problem.
But anyhow, that he always said it was deliberate, because what Johnson said, "I want that ship on the bottom and every sailor killed," and that's what he said in the Oval Office. So, like I said, it hit that I-beam exactly square, and it made most of the explosion go out, and made the 40-foot hole. If that would have been 1 inch to the right or 1 inch to the left, of where it hit, we'd have been cut in half, and we'd have been in the bottom in minutes. So to me, that's an out of control president. To me, that this idea of no man left behind. I agree with that 100%. A pilot goes down on an aircraft carrier, and they search thousands of square miles to try to recover that guy. You're damn right they should. But here's a president that's willing to sacrifice the whole crew for political reasons. And we put our hand
Johnson
up in good faith.
Johnson was a disgusting human being, Richard. I mean,
yeah, don't let him off so easy. He
I don't even think
he's willing to kill a whole crew. Well, let's face it. Let's think how he got in office. Okay, I'm not going to say a whole lot about that, but
no, I think you summed it up well with that. I'm gonna make you hang on right there because we got the top of the hour break coming up. You were talking about the Amberjack. Now this totally blew my mind. I had known a little bit about the Amberjack, and I knew that it was there, and I had heard that it was taking pictures, but I had never heard that they had fired the torpedo that hit you guys. It is interesting, though, because that correlates with what the Israelis said, because the Israelis said that the torpedoes missed, and nobody ever bought it. They always said, well, one of them hit. They got torpedoed because there was evidence of the torpedo explosion. Obviously, you guys got torpedoed, but the Israelis always contested that the torpedoes missed.
Well, that was one time they were telling the truth, because when this is sort of getting ahead of the story, but yet it needs told right now. When the USS Liberty got to Malta, they cordoned it all off and would not let any reporters. They all had to stay on shore. They were not allowed anywhere near the Liberty, and that's when they threatened the crew, because I think they were fearful that if anybody had a telescopic lens or something, if they just saw a fragment of the torpedo that had been left and had USA on, you imagine what that would have done? This is my point. That's why they made it hushed up, and boy, they got that damn thing welded up as quick as they could to hide the evidence, if nothing else. But they had divers in there, looking, and you can bet they threatened all those. I mean, that's the way they work. But anyway, the idea that these men put this on tape, and they felt much better if they did. It is just mind-blowing, yes, that an American ship will fire another American ship, but they're ordered to. I don't blame the captain of the Amberjack, at all. I mean, it's really a sick president. I mean, it really not in his right mind or something going on. But anyway, to get back to part of the story, when we're praying in the corridor, the whole 17 hours that we had to wait, I would not close my eyes, because I felt if I closed my eyes, I opened the door to die. And I mean, I was whipped naturally, and then naturally hurting very badly. And I stayed awake the whole time until I was evacuated to the USS America, and I didn't go out until they put me under. The first operation was an 8-hour operation, and that's when I went out, and then I slipped into a coma. But anyway, it just.
We were talking about
what I want to share with you is the Israelis said it was an accident or something like that. Well, the way you take a ship out, okay, is you send jets with armor-piercing rockets and cannon fire to make holes in the ship. Any holes anywhere.
This is what I was actually going to ask you. You had brought this up during the break. How many holes were in the ship?
There was 821 holes in the metal. Now, there was a lot of sort of marks that didn't make it through, but these were actual holes in the ship. And after that, then you bring out, after they empty out, you bring out, bam, the napalm was there. Well, you got the holes there, you drop the gel gasoline inside, you burn the ship within. And then you have the torpedo gunboats. Now, if you're trying to tell me this is an accident, that takes a lot of coordination to bring an attack like that on. Think about it. Just think about the plan they had to have that all happen. And what was really bad and really pissed Johnson off is I commend the damage control guys, the firefighters, everybody on the crew for keeping us afloat, because it foiled Johnson and Diane's plan to sink that ship and kill every sailor, because he even went to the length of having the Amberjack hit us with a torpedo, and that didn't even work. And I'll tell you, if there's ever a ship that can exemplify the saying of "don't give up the ship," it's the USS Liberty, because I'm telling you, they were under fire, and they were fighting fires, and there were bullet holes going into the fire hoses, and they just go to get another hose, and it's just unbelievable what they were doing. A lot of these guys weren't wounded, but they all were wounded mentally with PTSD, every one of them, because none of us, I mean, the divorce rate for the USS Liberty was something like 68%, or even higher than that. At one time it was 68. That was before I got divorced. Anyway, it just the level of PTSD, and the idea of the level that the kind of men that were on the Liberty, I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart, because that's why I am here. Is because not only the great guidance of our captain, but all these other guys that went out there in harm's way to keep the ship afloat and putting mattresses up, and big holes in the side of the ship and stuff, so we didn't sink. I mean, it's just surreal, how they pulled it off. And this must have made Johnson so aggravated that he went to that extreme. And that didn't work. And that is why, I say, that I got to look here.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it true that they eventually had to stop firing on you guys, right? Because there was a Russian ship that happened upon the scene eventually.
What happened is we got that friend of mine, Terry, he risked his life, and Jerry rigged an aerial that was not hot. They sent heat-seeking missiles, the first thing, to take out all our communications, and then jammed. They were jamming our communications, but he got an SOS out, and that's what saved, basically. So many things saved the ship, basically, but that was the biggie of him getting that out, and once that was out and got around, well, then other countries heard it, and what do you do now, kind of thing. Well, they came back, and they were all loaded up, ready to kill everybody on board. They were just combat soldiers, just ready to hit the ground and come in and kill everybody who was aboard the ship.
Didn't they roll in with helicopter gunships too? There was a fourth wave that not many people even know about.
That's what they did, but then they must have got a radio message to stand off, because I guess too many countries or people or whatever knew what was happening, and if they did that, then they'd have been in between a rock and a hard place. So they called that off, and the fact is, the one torpedo gunboat come over and asked, need any assistance, and that's when the captain told them to go to hell. But anyway, it's I just gotta look, because I gotta put reminders down here so I don't get to. Sometimes with PTSD, you talk in circles.
Yeah, no, you're doing fine.
But anyhow, I got to the point that they evacuated me, and then I slipped in a coma. And then when you're in a coma, I don't know how it would be for anybody else. I was on the other side. I was in a tube, and I know you hear these life after death kind of things, but there was nobody. It was just a dot, a dash, a dot, a dash, a dot. And to me, that was my pure spirit within me that was in this tube, and it was sort of a liquid, almost gel, clear tube, and there was a light at the, like where my feet would be, at pretty far away from me, and it was dark behind me. And I wanted to go in the light so much, but I never felt so much love. I mean, I could actually, my spirit could actually feel the love of God. And I'm not preaching here. I'm telling you just what happened. And it felt so good, and I just wanted to go into the light so bad. But I ended up coming back out, and then I was blinking my eyes, and like I said, it was like my head was in a milk bottle with milk, and the more I blinked, the clearer it got and everything. And they had Corman with me 24 hours a day, and boy, as soon as I woke up, he yelled, Weaver's awake, Weaver's awake. Well, shoot, I had all kind of doctors and nurses around me, and I joked when I looked at my body, because I had this big old colostomy, it was as big as my fist, sticking out my side. I had, they didn't have any colostomy bags or anything like that, so any movement or anything just went all over my chest, and it was just awful to even talk about. And I apologize if anybody's having supper, okay? Anyway, I looked down and I saw all these tubes, and I told Dr. Flynn, I said, my God, I look like a 56 fuel-injected Chevy here. Well, they laughed, and then I started laughing. Oh, my God, it hurt so bad, so I couldn't laugh anymore. And anyway, then, I got to the point that they were giving me blood, and then they did another operation, and then I went to Crete, and they had done one there, and then I got to move to Naples, and they did one or two operations there. Then I got to Philadelphia Naval Hospital, and when I was in the Philadelphia Naval Hospital, I got a couple operations, and then I was 2 days out of intensive care, and still fighting for my life. I wasn't out of the woods by any means because of infections and everything else that hit me. And anyway, I was in, intensive care, and they just moved me up to the 6th floor, where my bunk was. And then Corman come over and said, there's an admiral downstairs that wants to talk to you. And my first reaction was, what the hell did I do? And anyhow, not as clear because I was medicated, okay? Because naturally there was a lot of pain involved. But anyhow, they used bottles back in instead of bags, and they were clanging around, and it took 3 people, because one on each side to guide the bottles, and then somebody to push me in a wheelchair. And buddy, when you have your abdomen opened up, and then you have to, laying down is bad enough, that's fine. But boy, when you have to sit up, I mean, the pain is just unbelievable. Well, they pushed me down and went down the elevator, and inside the lobby, there was a room, about a 10-foot by 10-foot room, that they pushed me in and turned the wheelchair around, and then and then they left, and then in came this admiral, and a 3-star admiral, Isaac Kidd, and he came in there, and boy, the first thing when I saw all that brass, in the wheelchair even, I just, automatically wanted to snap the attention, just automatic from being in the service. And he closed the door, and then he said first, he said, are you Richard Larry Weaver? I said, yes, sir. And he said, okay, and he turned and shut the door, and he deadbolted it. And I got concerned because I didn't know what he was going to do. And he said, well, Richard, and he started taking the stars off. He said, well, I got my stars off. He said, I'm just a man just like you. Now you tell me what you saw, on that day, and just talking man to man. And I did. I talked, man to man. I felt pretty comfortable with that. And I told him about being the best eyewitness account, because I was, so far aft on the ship that I could see much better, because I had a longer range of vision, than anybody else, on the ship. anyway, he put his stars back on, and the tone of his voice, you know, I mean, I was horrified during the attack, but the tone of his voice, it takes a lot to scare me. But I was scared because he just said, if you tell anybody anything about this, wife, mother, father, anybody, said, you're gonna be put in prison and we're gonna lose the key. I'm 21 years old and I'm fighting for my life, serving my country, and an admiral takes the time out of his day to come down and see a seaman, a boatswain mate, and threaten him. It must have been, I must have been pretty damn important or something, or it's what you said before, that what I saw was it. And believe me, when I told him that was the start of my troubles, because that's what my DD-214 never showed that I was on the USS Liberty. They give me a regular separation, not a medical discharge or anything like that. They never told me about the VA or disability retirement. And on my DD-214, where it had VA, I didn't know what the VA was. They had double X's in there. That was X'd out. Where it had medals, they had service medal, like anybody would get, you know, at your boot camp. You know, you get that ribbon. But
yeah, the National Defense Ribbon.
Right, and they didn't have about the Purple Heart or anything like that. And then, well, like I said about the duty station, it didn't, you know, Liberty just was not mentioned in any of my records anywhere. And there must have been something going on, because they said I had a physical at the Navy Yard in Philadelphia, and I was never there in my life. I went over to get mustered out. Fact is, I had to extend, I think it was 19 days, because the hospital wouldn't release me because my wounds weren't healed good enough yet to be separated. And so I had to sign a paper on that, too. The fact is, I just found it today. And anyway, they had a place to sleep upstairs, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, boy, I was down there first thing. And they, you know, went on, and guys come in, and an hour and a half. Well, they were in and out, and paperwork, they were gone. And it got 2:30, 2:45, and I'm up there. I said, man, what's going on? What, these guys are coming in here right and left, and you're bypassing me. What's happening? Well, they're working on yours. Just a minute. And somehow, I guess it got to somebody, you know, maybe Isaac Kidd or whoever. Somebody made a decision that, no, we're not mentioning Liberty on any of his paperwork or something, because something had to be, you know, handled in such a way, because, you know, they put the physical, they said I was ready for duty. I had papers from the hospital telling them my disabilities, that, you know, the nerve damage that I had, and you know, I have over 60 pieces of shrapnel in me yet today. And, you know, they just went, you know, the doctor went over everything, so it showed my disabilities, but then they fudged up this report that physical that I went to the Navy Yard and never been there, saying I was ready for duty. So I went home. 2 weeks, I go to the Reserve Center, because you're supposed to report in 2 weeks, and Commander Doherty, nice guy, he was in charge of the Reserve Center, because I went immediate active duty, and because I wanted to get that done. And this is sort of backtracking, but this tells you a little bit more about Larry Weaver. I think that my dad served in the Battle of New Britain, on his boots on the ground, and the Battle of New Guinea, and they were pretty. He saw some pretty bad stuff, and he had real bad PTSD. And, you know, you just didn't get smacked. You got the belt, that kind of thing. And it wasn't his fault. They never give him any treatment or anything like that. And I asked my mom when I was in 4th grade. I said, "Was Dad any different, you know, when you first got married?" Because he tried to join the service like 4 times, and each time they turned him down because there was something wrong with his ankle and his foot and all this. And he kept trying to get the service time in before he married my mom. And they went and said, look, go home, marry that woman, you have your kid, and all. So he did. And then they called him up after that. And then he was over New Britain, New Guinea. Anyway, after my mom told me about this, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in 4th grade, and we always said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, the first thing before we, started our schoolwork. And man, I had tears coming down my eyes. And I made a promise to myself right then and there that I kept, that my dad put his life on the line to protect my freedom. That before I get married, that I am going to serve my country first and then get married and have my kids. Because my dad did that for me, then I am going to do that for my kids. And that's, that has to do with the overall story in a lot of ways, because that's why I enlisted instead of...
It's important to know your motivation. Look, not only is it important to know about the Liberty, Richard, but it's important for the listeners to understand your motivation and kind of, the least I could do is afford you the time to let the listeners get to know you a little bit. And hopefully, again, somebody will pick up the mantle and help you write your book, because I think your son's correct. You really need to get your story in a book, because, I mean, I honestly think not, and ladies and gentlemen, this isn't Richard trying to make money, obviously. He just wants to get the truth out. And I honestly think this would be, it would beat any of these fictional crap books, written by Tom Clancy or anything like that. Personally, I think it would be a page-turner.
Well, one thing I got to tell you, that my biggest wound that I have is not the United States of America.
You know what, Richard? Hang on, because we're gonna get cut off by the break. I'll let you pick up right there when we get back. And honestly, you can tell through what Richard's been through with his VA experience, which we're going to get into, and how, like the Admiral coming in and, pulling off their stars. Let me tell you something. As a veteran myself and as a sailor, if an Admiral comes in and sits and talks to you and pulls his stars off and says, we're going to talk man to man, that's crap. Okay, what he's doing is he's, quote unquote, getting your tail off the record because he doesn't have his stars on, and then he pins them back on and tells you what you're gonna do. And that's what they did to Richard and the other survivors of the Liberty. They split you guys up so that you guys couldn't talk amongst each other. Scattered you to the four winds of the Navy, and then do things like they did with your medical records and your DD-214 and everything else. Which, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't understand. If they screw with your DD-214, it doesn't matter if you have video footage of, Richard could have 8mm footage and pictures of himself on the Liberty dancing around avoiding bullets. And the VA will say, if it's not in black and white, it didn't happen. And that's just the way they are. So it's that easy to screw people over. And that's one of the ways that they intimidate veterans that experience stuff like this. And I've witnessed it firsthand, and it disgusts me, and it pisses me off. You know that. I do shows on Veterans Affairs all the time, and that's why it's an honor to be able to have Richard come on and tell his story. Now, Richard, getting back into it,
Okay, after I got threatened by a 3-star Admiral...
What was his name again?
Isaac Kidd.
Admiral Isaac Kidd. Okay, go on.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure.
He was a 2-star admiral, and he hit the mainland, and I guess Johnson gave him another star for covering stuff up. That's the main thing I can figure. Anyway, I want to get to this, that after I had conflicting records, basically. First, it's an outright lie about the physical at the Navy Yard, because that never happened. But I had my medical records, and then I reported it to Doc Doherty, my commander at the reserve center, to fulfill my reserve time, because I went immediate active duty. And then I got sidetracked telling you about fourth grade. Well, anyway, the jump ahead and back at the same time because related. Admiral Starring, who's was a Judge Advocate General, retired. I had lunch with at 2005, I think it was, and we were by ourselves at the table. A couple guys were eating with us, but then he said, "Richard, how are you making out?" I said, "Well, I'm just sort of doing day to day is about all I can say, the best I can. I mean, they're making it tough in a lot of ways." And he said, "Well, you're getting your disability retirement, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, what's that?" And right away, that's when the investigation started, because I wanted to be buried, near the captain, and you have to have the paperwork, And anyhow, the investigator started to investigate about this because when I got to Doherty, he told me, he said, "Richard," he said, you have too many disabilities that you cannot fulfill your reserve time. Just go home and wait on your discharge. No paperwork, nothing." And at that time, I was still in sort of the race mind, military mind of the idea that, yes, sir, that's it, because he's brass. And that was it. But the thing is, Admiral Starry told me, Doherty should have told you immediately, gave you a form for disability retirement, because the way Starring told me, he said disability retirement is for those that are wounded or hurt while serving in the Navy or Army or whatever. He said that are hurt that bad that they do not have an option to make the Navy or the Army, whatever service, a career. It's taken away because of you serving the Navy. And that disability retirement is automatic until the VA is over. And then they stopped it for a while. And in 2001 or 2003, they started it up again because they found out through the way the laws were written that the guys that got disability retirement should have been getting the whole time, because that was a complete separate entity than the VA. But with the VA, I didn't know anything about it, and my dad helped me get a job, and then the boss asked me how the VAs treat me. And I said, "What's the VA?" Well, he gave me a dime, told me to call and make it real quick. I got a hold of my congressman, and he was livid. He was so pissed off. He said, I'll call you back in a few minutes. And I got an evaluation, make it real quick here because we're running out of time. And I was in and out in 15 minutes. They never took an x-ray. They didn't even take my blood pressure. All the doctor did was asked about the Liberty. And they gave a very low percent. I should have been 100% immediately, well, it should have been 100% permanent, because that's a little different than 100%. But anyway, it took me 29 years of appeals to get a fair hearing before they would admit that my wounds were permanent. Well, if they were permanent, and I think that was 1996, if they were permanent in 1996, they sure and hell were permanent in 1967. And I said to him, "Well, how far back do you go?" He said, "Well, to your last appeal." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, let me look." He said, "Well, it's a year and a half." I said, "Wait a minute. That appeal was an appeal on an appeal the whole way back." He said, "Well, that's the way our system is. We go back to the last appeal." I said, "Your system sucks." I said, "If I'd been in a car wreck in 1967 and it would have been in court all this time and they were found liable, they would have had to pay damages for the whole time. And that's just civilians. And you get in the military, and that's how they take care of you." I was so upset with that whole process because it took a lot out of me to keep appealing. And I was evaluated by some that didn't even speak English. One guy just grabbed a hold of my file, which is a thick file, and he did it like a deck of cards, and then he asked me a question I couldn't understand. He said, "Do you have any bronchial systems?" And I I said, yeah, I told him, yeah, I got bronchocysts, but I didn't know what he was talking about. And he banged his fist on the table. Man, I jumped back because, I was ready to nail him. And he said it real slow. He said, I asked you if you had any brothers and sisters. That's how badly he talked English. Now, I don't know a foreign language, but I'm not over there evaluating foreign people either. And I just got out of there before I hit him. And I told the secretary, I said, I'm leaving. I don't care what you do with evaluation. And I said, I just had to get out of there before I hurt him.
Well, that's disgusting. That's no way to treat a veteran, first of all.
Well,
and somebody with PTSD should not be treated that way. And that the guy, quote unquote, as a doctor, should have known better. And he ought to. You see, that problem is sometimes they use registered nurses who should know better as well. And sometimes they use people that have no medical background at all to do these evaluations. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the compensation and pension evaluation.
I gotta share this with you. The receptionist said, "Don't worry about it, Mr. Weaver. We had the cops in here 3 times last week. 3 veterans beat the hell out of him." So I felt a little better. I don't know why, but I did. Anyway,
you think he would have learned his lesson after getting his ass handed to him by 3 different guys?
Yeah, you thought, I mean, but then, some people, I don't know. I don't think they think. Okay, something I want to hit on here is, the idea of me being threatened and the crew being threatened, also. They weren't all, they weren't individually. It was more of a group because of being in Malta, and they rounded them all up, and threatened them. But the captain told me, we got real close, and he told me at one reunion, "There's something I want you to tell the crew at the right time." And he
this
told
is
me,
Captain McGonigal you're talking about, the captain.
Yeah, Captain McGonigal, captain of the Liberty. And I said, "Well, anything, sir. I'd be glad to do anything for you." So I wrote it down for word. And he had passed away, 99. And the next reunion I went to, I asked for some time to speak at the banquet. And I said, I got something here I got to tell you. And I was told by the captain that I would know the right time. And in his passing, I don't think he would have wanted me to tell him that while he was still alive. But he said, he is, I'll try to keep it. He said he is so sorry that he had to lie and to say what he had to say, which he knew was untrue, because, he was there too. And hell, that must have hurt the whole crew. And then he told me, just tell the crew that I was the very first one to be threatened. And I really had a hard time, and the crew had a hard time hearing that. And I thought, my God, what is going on, with our nation? The people you look up to, they get threatened, and they lie, not because they want to. It's because they're threatened. And I got to tell you another thing. This special investigator, he had 3 cell phones in his hand. My phones were tapped ever since 2005. When they started this up, he had 2 of them, that just like fried, broke down when we were talking. Then he got a BlackBerry when he first come out. And I knew they were tapped because I used to joke and saying about, because you could hear the clicking going on the tap. And it'd be the weekend. I said, boy, I won't say the words. I said, you poor buggers, you. I said, you're sitting around, and all you got to do is wonder what the Siemens are going to say again. Holy mackerel. I said, I hope you're getting time and a half for this stuff, and I just had fun with the idea. Well, anyhow, I was talking to the investigator out of Virginia, and he was talking to me, and we were getting into some heavy stuff. And they fried the phone in his hand. it actually burnt his hand. Now, what kind of control is that by the government with a cell phone? And this is back when the BlackBerries first came out. He said it actually made a burn mark in his palm. And because, I lost connection, I thought, well, what the hell happened to him? They must have cut him off or something. Well, he went down the mountain and called me from a payphone and told me what happened. He said, man, I got to go in here and get something for this burn. They burnt the phone in his hand. I never knew they had the capacity to do something like that. Anyhow, I got to get through this quick. Okay, this is about Congress. There were men on the Liberty. I mean, real men. You think of Macho Man and how they look, and gorgeous. And all. These guys were men, and what they did under severe duress. And the way Americans work, they get paid for what they know, basically, and their job performance. Well, that said, in my opinion, is Congress taking money under false pretenses? Because there are some that are educated in there, but they don't show any job performance. So that's taking money under false pretenses because they never get anything done. Before the Liberty was hit,
I agree.
Ever since then, that was a turning point in our history.
I was about to say the same thing. That was an exact turning point, because you brought up a great point that it's important to point out. If Johnson were alive, I would call for him to hang from the swing from the nearest tree. Yeah. Along with McNamara and the rest of his whole cabinet and anybody else that was involved in covering it up. And so people know, Senator John McCain's father was an admiral. He was involved in not only sending the Liberty to where they got attacked, but he was also involved in the cover-up. It's disgusting, it's reprehensible, and these people are all dirtbags, okay?
Yeah, exactly. And I would have put this out. The idea, no man left behind, I don't know if I hit on that, but I truly believe in that, because if a pilot goes down, from an aircraft carrier, they'll look, thousands of square miles, and they should, for days, sometimes even weeks, to try to recover that pilot. But here's a whole ship's company that had a death sentence handed by our President of the United States. That's simple. Now, what does that say in the minds of a 21-year-old serving his country, and all the other guys are on Liberty, doing their best to serve our country, and yet they're pushing this no man left behind kind of thing. And the other thing I wanted to make a point of is about Congress, and this is kind of cute because my son helped me with this. He said, Dad, you say the word Congress and break it down, and you say con. It's a con, okay? They're conning the people, and then grist. But if you put the word prog with grist, that's progress. You're heading forward. And you think of what Congress actually does between their breaks or vacation and everything else, and it's not too much gets done besides their little arguments. And put laws in, and then let them sit there, and then he said, well, this law's been on the book for years. Never have a vote on it, and they do it because they can. And we don't know about it, and we can't know about it because they hide behind different slogans. And right now it's Homeland Security. I mean, you or I could go to an airport, and really, if they had it in for you, if they say, hey, well, you got to get out of line here, or just say a couple nasty words on the side, and you react to it, and if that agent says, hey, don't you give me a hard time, well, hey, I need help over here. I mean, he could really make it dramatic. You could be in jail.
Well, we have a few minutes left. You were on the list. You had
I couldn't fly
back and forth to be able to actually have surgeries to stay alive and improve your living conditions and everything, and you had to prove who the hell you were, and you had to go through this hassle.
Yeah, I had to wait. They had to go behind the wall and then call somebody or whatever. Yeah, and I was on the blacklist. My wife actually did it, fill out all the paperwork and everything to get me. to get me off of it.
That's harassment.
God.
That's what that's harassment because of who you are.
Oh, well, I tell you one thing, I ought to get another tattoo, somewhere in my body that says Mr. Harassed, because that's what it's been for the last, 45 years, and I'm not alone. Our whole ship's company is that way, because we've been harassed by being ignored. If you ignore somebody, that is the worst thing you can do. And the Navy doesn't want to recognize us as veterans, or even that this ship exists, and the government sure doesn't want to touch it.